Some wrecks belong to history, trapped beneath the cold embrace of the sea. But others seem to wait, hidden for decades, their stories lost until stumbled upon, half-remembered relics of men and machines that vanished long ago. The wreck of UB-29 was one such ghost. In the winter of 1916, a young German submarine slipped from its moorings into the bitter North Sea. UB-29 was built for stealth, a metal hunter moving silently beneath the waves, stalking Allied supply ships. She was part of the Imperial German Navy's U-boat flotilla, and by the end of that year, she'd already left her mark, sinking several merchant vessels in the crowded shipping lanes off England's coast. The crew aboard UB-29 knew what they were getting into. The war at sea was unforgiving. Life inside a U-boat was a constant dance with death, oxygen dwindling, cramped quarters, and the ever-present threat of depth charges exploding overhead. But for men like her captain, Eric Platsch, the thrill of the hunt made it worth the risk. Every ship sunk was another nail in the coffin of the British supply chain. And then, in December 1916, UB-29 simply disappeared. No distress call, no survivors, just gone. In the chaos of the First World War, ships vanished all the time, torpedoed, scuttled, or swallowed by storms. But UB-29's silence raised questions. She was an experienced boat with a seasoned crew. There were no reports of battle, no floating wreckage, no final message. For decades, the mystery of UB-29 lingered. Was she destroyed by a British minefield? Did her torpedoes misfire, or did the sea simply take her without warning? For decades, UB-29 remained lost, her fate a mystery locked beneath the waves. Families of the crew could only speculate what had become of their loved ones, and the submarine slipped from memory as the horrors of the First World War gave way to an even greater conflict just 2 decades later. It would be more than 100 years before the mystery of UB-29 resurfaced. In the summer of 2017, a team of Belgian and British marine researchers set out on what seemed like a routine sonar survey of the English Channel. Their task was to map the seabed, identifying wrecks that might pose hazards to modern shipping lanes. The Channel, a thoroughfare for centuries of trade and war, is littered with shipwrecks, cargo vessels, warships and fishing boats, each with its own story of misfortune. For the most part, the survey returned familiar shapes, the broken hulls of merchant ships, sunken tankers, and the occasional trawler lost in a storm. But one sonar reading stood out from the rest. At a depth of about 90 meters, the sensors picked up the long, slender outline of a submarine, a relic from a bygone era. It wasn't just the rarity of the find that drew the researchers' attention, but the submarine's remarkable state of preservation. The dimensions and shape pointed to a German U-boat, possibly from the First World War, but confirmation would require more than sonar images. The ocean, as always, guards its secrets jealously, and the team knew they had to dive to uncover what they had found. A few weeks later, a team of divers and remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, descended into the murky depths of the channel. The cold currents swept past them, and visibility was poor, but slowly the silhouette of the wreck began to take shape through the gloom. There she was, an intact submarine, resting silently on the seabed as if waiting to be discovered. Her once smooth metal hull was now encrusted with barnacles and coral, but the overall structure remained recognizable, untouched by scavengers or time. The divers moved cautiously along the length of the wreck, filming and documenting every feature. The conning tower was still intact, and the torpedo tubes lay silently at the bow, empty and waiting for a payload that would never come. As the team reached the stern, they found the first major clue to the submarine's fate. A section of the hull had been violently ruptured, the metal twisted outward in a way that suggested an internal explosion, or the impact of a powerful mine. After meticulously recording every detail, the researchers focused on identifying the vessel. Based on its size, layout, and condition, it was clear they had found a German U-boat from the First World War. But which one? The final answer came when the divers spotted a crucial marking on the hull, faint but still legible after all these years. It was UB-29, the submarine that had vanished without a trace in December 1916, taking her entire crew of 30 men to the bottom with her. The discovery of UB-29 was a breakthrough but also deepened the mystery. The damage to the stern indicated that she might have struck a mine while running submerged at night, but there were no records of a British minefield in that area, nor were there any reports of enemy action that could have accounted for her sudden disappearance. Had the submarine drifted off course, or had an uncharted rogue mine been waiting for her in the cold waters? Whatever the cause, it was clear that UB-29 had gone down swiftly and without warning. The sealed hatches told a haunting story. There had been no time for the crew to escape. They had perished inside, entombed in their iron vessel as it sank to the depths. The wreck of UB-29 is more than just a relic of war. It is a war grave. It holds the remains of the men who served aboard her, young sailors and engineers whose lives were cut short by a conflict far beyond their control. As is the custom with military wrecks, UB-29 was left untouched. No artifacts or remains were recovered. Instead, the divers and researchers paid their respects in silence, knowing that this submarine was not just a piece of history but also a tomb. Like so many others lost in the First World War, the crew of UB-29 were ordinary men drawn into an extraordinary conflict. They were sons, brothers and fathers caught in a brutal struggle beneath the waves. And now, after more than a century of silence, UB-29 lies quietly on the seafloor, shrouded in darkness. The currents drift around her like whispers, and her metal hull slowly rusts away, one century blending into the next. History has a way of surfacing when we least expect it. The discovery of UB-29 was not just the rediscovery of a wreck. It was a reminder of the sacrifices made at sea, of the fragility of human ambition, and of the secrets the ocean keeps. Wars may end, and generations may pass, but the wrecks on the ocean floor remain, telling stories of courage, tragedy, and loss. UB-29's story is one of many, but thanks to the divers and researchers who found her, the UB-29 story will not be forgotten.